Hello, everyone, and welcome. I have a guest today that I'm really excited about. Her name is Tammy Roth. She has a PhD and she's spent decades as a holistic psychotherapist and now works as a quantum astrologer, women's retreat leader, and the creator of Quantum Astro School. She guides clients in accessing their chart through the quantum field for a more holistic experience, which is how she has gained much of her astrological understanding. She also uses the quantum embodied approach to activate galactic points in your chart for greater access to divine intelligence. And I had two sessions with Tammy, which is what led us to this conversation today, because I was just amazed at this different way of connecting with my own astrological birth chart and also very concisely dealing with subconscious aspects that came up. So, really excited to talk more about it. Thank you so much for being here, Tammy.
Yeah, thanks for being excited about it because I am too.
Awesome. Well, can you tell us a little bit more about your background and how you began to learn astrology and what led you to doing this kind of work that you've compiled with all the different things you've learned?
Sure. Yeah, so I was a holistic psychotherapist for many, many years, and I've always, used alternative energetic approaches. And I remember I knew that using people's charts in sessions would be so important and would be so, valuable. And I could not learn astrology. I would take classes, I got books, and it was like it would just flow right on through me. And it was so frustrating because I've said over and over, it's like, I'm not stupid. Why can I not grasp this? And I started being a facilitator of family constellations about 8 or 9 years ago. And before that, I did equine therapy. And so I realized that, and before that, I did dream work. And so what I realized is that all of those things, dream work, equine therapy, family constellations, is accessing the field.
Mhm.
And and I really, really enjoy working in the field because it's just this unlimited intelligence. Like it's all there. Whether you call it quantum field, Akashic records, I know you and I talked about that. So yeah, it's just like, wow, this is where it's at. And so I was doing some constellations with people. I realized, okay, I don't have to know astrology to constellate somebody's astrology. And I did have an astrologer there. It was on a retreat. She was helping with the astrology piece. I was doing the constellations piece. By the end of the retreat, I understood astrology. And it was just like it all clicked into place. And that's not to say that I haven't, continued reading books, taking courses and all that. But what's happened now is like, oh, I can retain it. I can understand it. It's like I understand the language now. And so now the process is that I'm, working at becoming more fluent in it, but it's like it all just kind of dropped in.
Mm.
So I feel like I had been trying to learn all this time through my left brain, and that's why I couldn't retain it. I view things holistically, I learn holistically, and so I believe by stepping into the field, I experienced it, as you've also said, as a living energy. It's not just this static, flat two-dimensional kind of thing. It is absolutely living energy. And and I also started bringing in creativity as I was learning. So every time I would tap into, if I had a transit or something happening, I would use paint canvas. Like I painted my second Saturn return, and it dawned on me, it's like, oh, these symbols of the signs and planets are sigils. They hold all this energy. And what if I paint the symbols and really let the energy of my chart come through me in that way. And that's what has just really, it just feels like everything has come alive. So then I started really bringing astrology into family constellation sessions. And when I started seeing that the astrology operates very much like our ancestors, which, if you think about it, I mean, if we come from the stars, then they are our ancestors.
Right.
And so, anyway, it's just been fascinating and fun and very eye-opening.
Yeah, and it's cool because I just feel like you're one of these people who's kinda on the edge of the new paradigm, like, like one of the pioneers. Like, I do feel like in the future, this is how we're gonna work more. It'll be more common to work this way because we know, like, the feminine energy is rising and a lot of people's intuition is coming back online, and we're being guided to go within for answers. And I just feel like
Right.
the astrology changes too. Like, even if you look back through the history of astrology, so much old astrology is so negative and can give you a really like negative, fateful story about what's happening in your chart. Where I feel like we're shifting more into how do I work with this energy and how do I transmute it and use it as like material to create with? It's like you're bringing in the creative aspect too. And I feel like humanity is stepping so much more into their creative power.
Yes.
Yeah. So that's really cool. And it was really awesome to have this session with you because I was just really drawn to having one. I was like, quantum astrology, I'm not sure what that is. And I've also been interested in galactic astrology. And so I actually was a little surprised in our first session when I was the one bringing through information essentially, like it's so different from, I wouldn't call it a reading. I would call it a session
Yes.
because it's almost like hypnosis. Or what it also reminded me of is when I take people into the Akashic records, they're there with me, even though I'm usually translating the information, but it was almost like the same setting, but if I let the other person translate the information, if that
Right.
makes sense.
Yeah. Yeah.
So it's really cool because for one, um, it's such a it gives the client such a direct connection with their own chart. And then
Yes.
as you had mentioned, it also lessens the probability of the facilitator projecting anything, which I mean, some of that is natural. And I also think like whoever's drawn to you for a reading will often have similar things going on. But I really enjoyed it because when we worked in this way with my placements, um, for one, I was introduced to further out galactic objects such as the Shapley attractor, because that is conjunct my south node. So it was neat to kind of encounter that object and get to know it in that quantum field. And then also, there was a lot that came up with that, like a lot of past life stuff that a lot of it I worked through, but when you gave me little phrases to say to my south node or to the Shapley attractor that, as you put it, helped lessen the tension that was there, I could feel it. Like I could feel it leaving my body. And I do understand there's so much magic in working in that quantum field because everything that comes into physical reality starts in the quantum field. So, why wouldn't you go to that place to try to rewrite a script or become aware of something and see if there's like a new perspective you could gain or some kind of release or forgiveness or whatever it is that needs to come up? Um, so it just feels like a really, really effective way to work with the chart.
Yes, I agree. And especially that part about reducing projections, because I mean, as I've learned astrology, obviously the, signs and planets have general themes and whatnot, but each person's chart is so unique and different. And then you bring in the aspects, and then you bring in how many, layers of past lives and your own soul's evolution. And I mean, it's gotten to the point for me. I don't see myself as ever being an astrologer who does a reading, because how in the world could I possibly know? But I can take you into the field and hold space for you to experience your own. And it's just way more fun that way too, because each session is so unique. And I never know what's going to happen.
Yeah, and through doing these, do you feel like you've learned a lot of new things about the planets? And obviously, there would be new things to learn about these galactic objects because we don't know a lot about them.
Right, right. um Yeah, well, the probably the biggest thing I've learned about the planets is just how different and personal they show up, for people.
Hmm.
And, you know, the that's what's different. And what is similar is every single session I've ever had, the planets are here, absolutely here to support us. There is no malevolent, I'm going to punish you. Like, none of that kind of energy has come through. Which, I mean, I knew that, but it's very validating to see just how, I mean, these planets they have their own frequency.
Yeah.
And I believe they also have, like a spectrum there, like the light aspect and the darker aspect. Um, but I've also seen, much like an ancestor will in a family constellation session, I've seen, like in one session, I saw Saturn be incredibly angry, and Saturn dropped through the anger and got to grief.
Mm.
And and then once Saturn got to the grief, that's what really released, like, the tension in the field, in the chart. And the person who was, experiencing this, just had a flow of energy come through. It
Wow.
was, yeah.
Wow, that makes so much sense. It's
Right.
interesting because when you talk about the planets being like our ancestors, I can't help but kind of think back to Greek mythology a little bit. And I like to think that we descended from the gods, like humans descended, like we gradually sort of our consciousness shifted into physical form. And so that totally resonates with me that those planets would be our ancestors, or like you said, we come from the stars. And it's almost like I always think it's kind of funny how the Greek tales, like all those old myths, there's some really horrible stuff happening,
Yeah.
like, even though they're gods, like I think later how we've thought of a god has been like, oh, God is just good and that's it. You don't see the shadow aspects. But it feels like when you're talking about how benevolent their energy is, I just feel there's such an evolution in all of it, in the cosmos and humanity, because we obviously used to view them differently,
Right.
for whether that was for a valid, legit reason, or if it was just a reflection of where we were at, in our consciousness. But
That's a really good point. Yeah.
yeah. So you told me you've had some common messages come through from certain objects or planets. Are there any that you'd like to share?
Um, I guess I would call it more themes, like I've already talked about. Although with the galactic, super cosmic galactic points, there has definitely been, um, some, I guess it is beyond a theme and really a message. I had always viewed these, they're black holes beyond our galaxy, and I had viewed them as portals for us to access, this cosmic intelligence. And what they have said very consistently in sessions is no, we are the portal.
Mhm.
So it's not that we're going out to that consciousness flows through us. And I mean, once I heard that, I'm like, well, of course, that makes total sense. Um, but that has also come through multiple sessions. Like, yeah, we just get to be the channel for this divine intelligence to flow through.
Yeah, to bring like it feels like bringing that quantum reality into physical reality, right?
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I've seen that too in the records. I asked about, I think I was asking about like power spots on Earth. I'd have to look back at my notes, but I got the same message. It's like you are the point, like wherever you go. And I kind of saw people on Earth as like little stars, like
Yeah.
moving around, And I'm even seeing now how like whoever we end up living around and connecting with, that's like our little constellation,
Yeah. Yeah.
Which now is interesting. We're connecting all over the world, which if you think about it, that's such a wonderful mirror for being able to access this quantum field too.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah,
Yeah,
because we are transcending time and space right now. I mean, it's, being on Zoom, it's really remarkable.
it is. It is. So do you feel like these sessions are for anyone, or do you feel like you need to have some kind of psychic experience, or who do you feel like would benefit from these sessions?
Um, I no, I don't think you have to have any kind of psychic experience, but I do think you have to be open to being a channel for it to flow through. So, I think anybody that would just be like, oh, that's stupid, I don't believe in that. Well, yeah, you probably don't need to do it. Um, but I've had, I mean, especially, well, with the quantum astrology as well as doing family constellation work, I've had people show up and just be like, I've never done anything like this. I don't know what I'm doing. And it's like, you don't have to. And it's just amazing how anybody, yes, anybody can access the information.
Yeah.
Um,
It kind of
but
feels like trusting your imagination a little bit
yeah,
too.
yeah,
Because
that's
I
all.
always feel like I used to think it was all my imagination, and I'm like, well, where does that come from anyway?
Right.
You know?
Yeah.
So, yeah, that was one of the things that I was interested in hearing. But yeah, I think it's such a cool way to connect. Like I feel like, especially, I mean, for anybody, but then also especially if you're an astrologer, I feel
Yes.
like this can open up so much more for you because even from our session, I went on to, for the next, I think it was the full moon, I went on just to connect directly with the moon,
Yeah.
which I'd done before. Like I definitely have been working with the planets in this way, in some way, but you definitely showed me more of a structure or a container for it.
Mhm.
And and it was really cool to just allow the planets to come in that way rather than just looking at the chart and trying to intellectually interpret it. And I've been doing a lot of research lately because I feel similarly to you where left brain astrology sometimes just doesn't stick. Um, and then I don't know, I can learn about it, but it just kind of like it goes out there somewhere. I mean, it's almost like it's still out in my awareness and I could access it, but there's something so much more powerful about having the firsthand experience with those energies and tuning into them that way, like just tuning into what's alive. So it was really fascinating to see how they show up also as these archetypes, like
Yeah.
they're like these characters kind of.
They are. Yes.
Yeah. And
Yeah.
I've always felt like with the Akashic records, a lot of people go in and they try to see past lives and like these really specific things. And for me, I guess this ties back into like trusting your intuition in these sessions. I've always looked at it as like a story. rather like what story are the records showing me that I can learn something from, almost as if I was reading a fictional book that has lessons in it, but I don't have to necessarily tie myself to that past life story and create all these other stories around that, but just to see it as like, okay, well, what do these symbolically mean and how can I apply it to my life now? Because that's really like the important part, right? We're trying to figure
Right,
out
right.
how to navigate now.
Yeah. Yeah. And you don't have to go into the deep feeling of that past life in that way too, if you're looking at it symbolically.
Yeah, which I feel like I definitely have. I've definitely felt some really intense stuff from um, past life experiences, whether that's good or bad. But I agree. I feel like working this way takes some of the pressure off from needing to put yourself in that kind of state of being, if that makes sense. Um,
Yeah.
and then
Right.
it's just more direct.
Yeah. Yeah. And another way I think of this approach to doing the astrology is it makes me think about how I view my body and
Mhm.
medicine, like Western medicine is so left brain pieces and parts, and yet we're holistic systems. And I know my body better than any doctor is going to know my body, and that's not always a popular opinion in a
Mhm.
medical system. But I feel like this is the same thing. It's like if you can really tune into your chart from a holistic perspective and feel it in your body, you're going to know it better than anybody else. And that doesn't mean that you don't still need a guide there to, look at what's happening, transits and that kind of thing. But to do it through the body.
Yeah. Yeah. That even makes me feel like this method is so valuable for medical astrology too.
Ooh, yeah.
I feel like
Ooh,
you could really look at like, okay, what sign is this planet in? Does it connect with this area of the body that's coming into my awareness or whatever?
right.
It's so cool. It's so nice that I do feel like people's minds are opening up to working in this way
Yeah.
because I've gotten more, like I was mentioning earlier, I've gotten into like some more classic astrologers recently just because I felt like brushing up on that side, like on that academic side of it or technical side of it. Um, but what I hear them say over and over is like, we can't prove that. Like it sounds like, or they feel like they don't have enough evidence for it, or it surprises me how scientific they can get, with the astrological process, or they need more data or, so I feel like there's so much more we could discover if we just keep our mind and our channel open and just trust our intuition and what's coming through. I think
Yeah.
trusting is that's been a major lesson for me personally, is learning how to trust it. Did you ever have to go through that?
Oh, absolutely. Yes. And I think collectively that's like one of the biggest things we're facing right now is because we give our authority away to, the doctors, the priests, the professors, all these people. So
Yeah.
yeah, for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, it's definitely a new way of thinking about things, and it kind of came up in my session, this theme of like um wanting to share this stuff but feeling like you can't because like people are going to think you're crazy or something. It's kind of like this whole old witch wound. And as I'm speaking, I feel like this Uranus conjunct Algol transit is coming to my awareness again. It feels like a chance to break free of that, to break free of having to see everything in a hyper materialistic way, you
Right,
know?
right, for sure. Yeah. Yeah. And Yeah, I believe the going back a little bit to what you were saying about the, more classical astrologers and needing science. I think that's part of like when you once you experience, some part of your chart and you feel it in your body, like that's all the proof you need. It's like, no,
Yeah.
I know what I know now because I felt it, I saw it, and to me, there's just nothing stronger than that kind of proof.
Yeah, especially when you're making changes in the field.
Yes. Yeah.
Because you like I could feel it. Like I could feel weight releasing off my shoulders like as we were working through things. And yeah, if that works for you and you feel better, it's like how could you doubt it, you know?
Right.
And it was funny, I just turned on the radio on my way to somewhere yesterday and they were interviewing a guy who wrote a book about where would humanity be without the stars? It was something like that. And of course, like the conversation is not going nearly as deep as I want it to. But the host said something like they were talking about how astronomy actually came from astrology, that there was astrology before. And then the astronomers started to work off of what astrologers had discovered. And this woman hosting says, "Isn't it fascinating that something so unscientific led to this science?" And I was just laughing to myself because to me, astrology is some sort of science. And I feel like the part we've been missing is the spiritual side of it, or you could even call it the quantum side of it, you know? I think it's really exciting. We're coming into this time where it's like we're getting closer to having a spiritual science, you know,
Yes.
with like these quantum, discoveries in quantum physics and quantum entanglement. So anyway, that just cracked me up because I was like, oh my gosh. We still got some ways to go, but
Yeah.
are there any stories that you could share or that you'd like to share from any of your sessions?
Yeah, what was just coming through was like my own skepticism. I always have healthy skepticism with everything that I learn. And so as I got to the point that I really could understand astrology, then I started like, doing my own investigations. And so when I started looking at like the big transits, like Saturn returns and that kind of thing, I got curious. I'm like, okay, if you're not observing, if you don't know a transit is happening, does it still affect you? That was kind of my question. And so I was reading Barbara Hand Clow. I can't remember the exact name of the book, but it was about the big transits and Kundalini awakening. And as I was reading about the Uranus opposition, which happens at like 42, I think,
Yeah.
um, I was reading that, and that it's that like if you're it's very electrical, because it's Uranus. And whatever she was saying, it was about like the Kundalini energy will be activated, but if you're not aware, if you're not listening to your intuition, if you're not making the changes you need, it can really get blocked, and and you can end up sick. You can have like mental health issues, physical issues. And as I was reading it, I was like, oh my gosh, I wonder if that time I ended up in the hospital with spinal meningitis
Whoa.
was when I was 40. So I go into the ephemeris and look, and sure enough, I was in this situation. I was in a work situation that I didn't need to be in, and I just would not let it go. And
Mhm.
I wasn't following my intuition, and I kept getting sicker and sicker. And
Mhm.
finally had to go to the ER, and I still remember the spinal tap and them showing me the fluid off my spine and me just being like, oh my gosh. And once they did the spinal tap, this clarity of insight flowed through me. It, like the energy got unblocked,
Wow.
and I resigned and I moved on. So I look back at that and it's like, yeah, Uranus was kicking my butt.
Mhm.
And I was also looking at, I tuned in, I tuned in even though it wasn't through astrology, and I made the changes I needed to make.
Mhm.
Um, so there was something interesting, like in some indirect way, I was working with the astrology, you
Yeah.
know. It
Yeah.
was like it was happening whether I was aware of it or not. Um,
Well, yeah, I think that these energies run through us whether we're aware of it or not. Like I think it's funny. I sometimes feel like I have astrology vision because I'll listen to like something my mother-in-law is saying and I'm like, "Oh my God, that's Mars."
yes, yes,
Like you can hear the planets talk through people and even
yes.
like different psychics who are on YouTube or whatever might be talking and I'm like, "Oh, they're literally like they're translating the astrology right now." So, it just feels like it's so much inside of us and a part of us, which is like what you're discovering with this work. And
Oh,
how wild that story is like for like with the spine it being the spine and that's usually like the kundalini activation where the energy goes up your spine. I mean, that is just wild.
yeah, it was so literal.
And this came up in a conversation with some friends yesterday because one of my friends is about to have her Uranus opposition. And I said the exact same thing. I haven't read Barbara's book, but I was like, it seems like if you're already on the path and you're doing the things you need to do, like it's only going to like give you some kind of boost. And if
Right.
you're not, it's going to set you straight and put you on that path. And there was somebody who recently shared like a little video meme of all these women who are like the millennial generation and she was like the like old midlife crisis is the new spiritual awakening. Like if we're
Right.
working on these issues and like becoming more authentic to ourselves, like we might be able to not have to go through some of those things, but even so when we do it sets us on our path.
Well, and that's the thing is if you view it all as it's all leading to freedom. I mean,
Mm,
it's just such a shift in perspective because I have been going through my second Saturn return. And so I approach this like I'm not going to be afraid of Saturn. Like there, and every time I have hit some kind of like tension in the field, so to speak, I dialogue with Saturn. Like, what am I not seeing? I know you have my highest interest. I know you want me, to have more freedom. And it's been lovely. It's like Saturn is this just really supportive father that's not going to let me get away with, being blind to things.
mm,
But yeah, it's just it's so to me it's so powerful when we take the fear component out and know that it's all for our highest good and highest evolution, and
yeah.
that it can get uncomfortable if we're not conscious with it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it is interesting how powerful it can be to let go of the fear and surrender and just stay curious, you know?
Right.
Like rather
Right.
than being afraid of finding something wrong with us, what if we could
Exactly.
just stay curious and be willing to learn, you know?
Yeah, and that this isn't original. I've heard this multiple places, but I think it's so powerful to be willing to say, how is this happening for me?
Yeah.
Like, just okay, if I trust that it's all happening for me, how is this for me? And the hardest experiences usually lead to the biggest insights.
Yeah,
And yeah,
for sure. I've definitely experienced that in my own life. And I also want to say something as a person who has gone through some major challenges. I've also had to sort of let go of the story that it always has to happen that way,
yeah,
you know? And that came up in my session too, where I realized, oh, I am letting go of waiting for the other shoe to drop.
Yeah,
Like it could be the future can be um so much better, and like I can look at the future and say, well, how much better can it get? Like I don't have to always expect something really awful to
right.
happen next. Which is
Exactly.
like, it's so interesting because it does feel like on some level we manifest the things that happen in our lives.
Yeah, and that, I mean, that can be a really hard, um, bitter pill sometimes, but yeah, I just feel like if we can rise above even the most painful situations and trust that, whatever how in however intense this pain is, there is something for me to, gain through it.
Yeah.
That it takes us out of victim consciousness is what it does. And yeah, I think that that's it for me. It doesn't mean that really horrible, painful things won't happen, but we don't have to be a victim of it.
Yeah, that's a really good. I really like how you distinguished that point, like for sure. Um, yeah, so with galactic astrology, I'm curious what drew you to it and what you feel like you've been learning about it through these methods.
So what drew me is that my south node is at the galactic center, and
Oh,
I had never even heard of anything galactic, and I was having a session with somebody who we had run out of time and I had to hang up, and she said, "Oh, I just wanted to make sure you know your south node's at the galactic center. All right, bye." And I'm like, "What? What does that mean?" And so I went on this quest of like, what in the world does that mean? The galactic, I mean, it just sounded so intriguing, the galactic center. And that led me to finding Julia Balaz and galactic astrology, and which the thing that I have been most fascinated are these four super galactic points. They
mhm.
are massive black holes. But in her program, like we can do a galactic chart and it shows all the fixed stars, and she has identified a process like the outer planets. If you have outer planets like conjunct or opposite these fixed stars, that it's showing the outer planets are like your point of origin, and the closer you get in, like the sun being conjunct something is like your most recent incarnation from that star system.
Oh,
And
interesting.
yeah, there's just so much to learn there. And my fascination has been with these galactic points. And then the other thing I've seen is I started noticing that almost everybody who came to me for a session had a planet or a point conjunct one or more of these galactic points.
Mm.
And so I started going in, like, let's bring that into your session and see what happens. And then there was a pattern of like activations happening as far as like energy really moving in the body, and like that galactic energy really integrating. And so from there, I got curious, like, well, maybe part of my purpose of how astrology has come into me is, especially since my south node is at the galactic center, that maybe that is part of my purpose is to attract people who have those points and this activation to happen. And then, like we've already talked about, you're the portal, and there's just more of this high frequency energy flowing through you on the planet when we so desperately need it. So,
Yeah. Wow. I love that, and I love the juxtaposition of your nodes too, because like Sagittarius, the galactic centers in Sagittarius, and that's so big picture. it's so like macrocosm, and then you're bringing it down to the individual and also working with all of this in such a curious, fun way. Like you're not telling people what their chart, you're letting them discover it. That's so Gemini, you
Right.
know?
Right.
And then like bringing it, yeah, down to these individuals. But what's so cool is that it is still such a big picture, um sort of, what's the word I want to use, end result, like that, like whatever work we do on ourselves does affect the collective and morphogenetic field. So that's so cool. Is your north node conjunct any galactic points by any chance?
No,
Nope.
no, I
Yeah.
don't. Um, it's funny because I have people come that have so many points, and I just have that one South Node at the
Oh,
galactic center. That's my only
well,
only.
that's a really cool point to have. You
Yeah,
know, there's
yeah.
so much that comes from that place. Do you mind if I ask, have you connected with the Galactic Center?
Oh yeah.
And what has come through for you?
Well, because I have a Virgo stellium, and so I'm very analytical. Like, what does this mean? What does this mean? And so I spent a lot of time just really inquiring and like, help me understand this. And I'd also been like, I've had dragons show up in dreams, giving me their names. I've had Magdalene Mystery School. I was not looking for that. It was like, through synchronicities, it's like, okay, I get it. I'm supposed to be in this program. So I've had all these things happen. And so I inquired with the Galactic Center. I'm like, okay, this is just another, like, what is it? And, am I connected to dragons or Magdalene or so anyway, what the Galactic Center, the way it described itself to me was like it's just this big holding ground for all these frequencies, especially these higher frequencies of higher consciousness. And that like the dragons are a very specific frequency, the Magdalene, Christ consciousness, very specific frequency. And it's like, yeah, like collect these, get these frequencies activated. Um, and that I guess in the beginning, I thought, oh, if I'm connected to the galactic center, I'm going to have ETs in my backyard, or, I was like, what
Yeah.
does this mean? And it was like, it was a very loving, kind energy that communicated, like, no, it's just a flow of energy. It is a flow of energy. It's cosmic intelligence. It's something you can tune into, and it was very calming when I experienced it from that standpoint.
Yeah.
So there, it's not personified for me. It's just I connect to it and I have a sense of knowing.
Yeah.
Um, and yeah, and it's really practical. It's very practical. I can give an example. Just over the holiday weekend, we had a real tragedy happen in the community where I live, where two people were walking from fireworks and were hit by a car and killed. And it was just like, oh, because it's a real small community and very quiet, sleepy little town. And I couldn't shake it. Like I just walked around with this grief for days, um and it seemed like everybody else around me was just back to life and not even thinking about it. And so I tuned into the galactic center. I'm like, what, why am I still feeling this? And the galactic center said, because it's really sad.
Yeah. Yeah.
And it was just so practical. It's like, I'm not strange. Maybe other people are strange because,
Yeah.
um, so there's a lot of practicality that just helps me be me.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, I love that. I love that, especially because for me, my brain just goes like off into all of these, like, it goes off. So I think probably your Virgo energy also helps you apply it in that way, you know?
Yeah.
Um, I've definitely connected with the galactic center a little bit. And just what I felt was that it was like the source of our solar system. And it's crazy when you think about all the sources there could be. And I'd love to connect with it again because you know what's occurring to me is how the galactic center is like the womb of Nut, the Egyptian goddess in the Milky Way. And it's kind of interesting because it's more like the galactic center is more like a big sun, right? Like it's like a big light. And when we connected with the Shapley attractor, which is a black hole, it was it was also kind of that energy, but different.
Yeah.
It was more like dark and but again, a womb space. I don't know, I just find that fascinating. I feel like I'm gonna have to tap into that and see, you know, what,
Well, each of these galactic points are, the Shapley is in the sign of Scorpio.
yeah,
So, each one is in a different sign. Well, there's two of them are in Sagittarius and then one in Libra and one in Scorpio, but they definitely take on the energy of that sign where
yeah.
they're located too. So,
Oh, that
yeah.
makes sense. And I'm also kind of getting this vision of like if you were looking at a black hole from the side, like if you had a diagram,
Uh-huh.
it would be like a torus field. And
Yeah.
perhaps one side is black and the other side is light. Like
Ooh.
like one side is the hole, and when you come out through like a sun or something. That's fascinating.
Oh, wow.
I kind of feel like that's what we're going through collectively
Yeah.
is like this we're getting sucked in through this black hole, and when we get through there's going to be some other side at some
Yeah.
point that's lighter.
That Taurus visual, when you said that, wow, that really resonates. Wow. Yes, I love that.
Yeah, I think that you might I wonder even do you know who Walter Russell is?
I've heard the name.
He was like this incredible philosophical scientist. I feel like he might even have a diagram of something similar to that. I don't know about the dark and the light, but he definitely was exploring a lot of these concepts in ways that most scientists probably weren't. He was using so much of his intuition and it can explain how so many things work. And actually, Tesla said that he should lock his work up because we wouldn't be ready to see it for 1,000 years.
Wow.
So I'm just feeling like I'm pulling in something I've seen of his. That's why I bring it up. But yeah, I think that's probably how black holes work. Is like we think it's getting sucked into nothing, but who knows? It's probably just like a rebirth portal, you know?
Yeah. Yeah, it's never felt like just the sucking vacuum into nothingness. It's always, that's why I viewed it as it was the portal. Um, because it felt like it's always felt like there's some kind of definitely consciousness there.
Mhm.
But yeah, so your visual really that's very comforting to me and resonates a lot.
Yeah, and it's interesting because when we connected in my session to the Shapley, it felt like I think I was even like sending some things to the Shapley to be recycled. And
Mm,
that's like reiterating that energy is like yeah, just letting things flow, letting it be recycled, letting it be transmuted, you know?
it's regenerative.
Mhm. Mhm. And
Yeah.
all this time it feels like we've been told like don't look in the like don't go in the dark, be afraid of
Yeah.
the dark, you know? And it's like no, the dark is not all bad. Like there is such a beauty
Yes.
in dark black compost and soil. Like that's where the life comes from, you know?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah.
So I feel like what you dip into in these sessions is that field. Like, and it's kind of funny, we call it a field. It's like
Yeah.
the big, like dark, fertile field. um, where there are already things existing. Now all the farmer sort of like metaphors are coming through. Like you can go in there and you can pull the weeds and you can plant new seeds, you know?
Yes. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. It was really funny to me that when I learned family constellation work, when I was in the quantum field, it was like, this is the same experience I have with the horses in equine therapy, except we weren't calling it the quantum field.
Mhm.
And so anyway, I said something to another equine therapist. I'm like, it's the field. And she was thinking of the pasture. And
Uh-huh.
she's, oh, you do constellations out in the pasture? And I'm like, no, no, it's, anyway, the field has a lot of connotations to it. So
Yeah. Yeah. Well, it's just that mirror again, right? Like the
yeah,
mirror of the earth and the stars. Um,
right.
that's fascinating. I'm curious about this equine therapy. Can you tell me, not to go off on a tangent, but I kind of want to know more about it. That is interesting.
Um, well, it's the horses live in, they don't have a big prefrontal cortex that they process everything through. They are like just this, they're highly sensitive. They have an intelligence about them, and there's a knowing. Like, of
Mhm.
all the trainings that I would go to, there was a consistent message from the trainers of, we don't really know why this works or how this works, but it does. There's enough evidence that the horses are predictable in how they respond. And then there would be other teachers who were really tuned in to, the more esoteric part, and they would just be like, it's energy, it's spirituality, these are divine beings, and there's an intelligence that transcends our big prefrontal cortex.
Makes sense. That's
Yeah,
bringing back the whole theme of like this work that you're doing too, and getting more into the what we would think of as like our right brain, you know?
yeah, right. Yeah, and I've always just been I could easily drop, even though I do have that Virgo stellium, I could easily drop into trust of, the spiritual realm, and so I could suspend judgment when I see a horse and know, like, this horse knows so much more than me, you know.
That's
Um,
really cool.
yeah,
Well, okay, so you are starting a quantum astrology school, correct?
yeah,
Do
yeah.
you want to tell us more about that?
Uh, yeah, so it's probably been close to a year that I've known it was coming, and like this approach, I have a real close friend that she and I have worked a lot in the field with our charts and just, exploring all of this. And so we've talked about, like, I've long known that I'm here to do something with this, and then my little critical brain says, you barely know astrology, you just dropped into this, and how rude, how presumptuous that you would think you can teach something. And but the thing that I've been passionate about is, I've long been passionate about people trusting their own intuition, people, getting their own answers. And as a therapist, that's, I would teach about your energy body. We would look at your dreams, and I was never the therapist that's going to interpret anything. I'm going to help you find your own answers.
Mhm.
And so I have felt that way about the chart. It's like, oh my gosh, we all have this blueprint, and most of us don't know anything about it. And those of us who do, we go to some expert to, get them to tell us about it.
Mhm.
And my passion is that we understand our own chart. We can still go to astrologers for sure. But that you go in armed with, okay, I know my chart. Let's have a conversation, and let me, be in dialogue with you.
Mhm.
And so then my experience of not being able to learn astrology easily, I think my whole experience is for me to use. And so fine, I'm kind of rambling. Sorry.
No, not at all.
I'll bring this home now. So it's been floating around in my field for about a year that, there's something wanting to come through. And I'm like, come on, give it to me already. I'm ready to do something with this. And so it just dropped in. I mean, it dropped in so fast, and it was a complete download of take people through a year-long process, and because it can't be quick, and
Yeah.
we want to embody every aspect of the chart. And so there will be some left brain teaching,
Mhm.
because yeah, we need to understand that part of how the geometry works and whatnot,
Mhm.
but that each person is going to go through and really experience every house sign and planet and aspect in their chart, through their body. And then by the end of the year, um, they will, it's astrology 101. So that's the other part. It's like, well, I feel equipped to teach astrology 101, and I have the utmost respect for, the astrologers who have decades of experience. And I'm not claiming to be an expert in astrology, but I am an expert in holding space for you to get in the field and have your experience. So,
Yeah.
yeah.
Oh, that's so cool. And I love that you're setting up that container that way because especially with it being a year-long process, because it does feel like I can feel there's a big emphasis on embodiment with your work
Yeah.
and taking time with each of those planets or signs or houses that could be a lot to integrate. So I think it's
Right.
really cool that you're setting up that container, not only for people to actually get through their whole chart and be held accountable to really connect with everything, but
Right.
then I can't even imagine like how you will feel by the end of it, you know?
I That's what I'm really feeling, is that this whole experience in a cohort where there's 12 of us together for 12 months with 12 houses, that there's going to be something really quantum about that experience in and of itself. I think we're going to learn a lot from each other.
Yeah.
Um, and then another part of it is that there will be an art component. And what I'm going to recommend, everybody can do what they want, but what I'm going to do is use little round, cards, card stock, and do my planets, and like, here's my sun. But so then I end up with like my own oracle deck of the signs and planets. And then that way, I've put the energy through my right brain into the cards. When I
Mhm.
experience them, I'll have notes on the back of, how Saturn showed up or whatever. And then when there's a transit, I can just pull these out of my deck and tune into the energy of the cards and, experience it. It's just another way to experience the chart.
Oh,
So,
so cool. I so see your nodes. Like it just, I want to just honor how much you're living your purpose. It's really cool just to
well,
see because you're bringing in this galactic knowledge and you're teaching, but then you're having the student find the answers within. Like it's just, I love it.
thank you for seeing that. And um, my good friend that we call it playing in the field. We play in the field with our charts a lot, and I had the awareness that I've been so connected to my south node, and that I said I really don't feel like I know my north node. And so we got in the field with it. And so I was, part of this work is you represent, you see through the eyes of, the planet or whatnot. So I stepped into my North Node, and I was what I would call like this frozen, loyal soldier. I could not move. I could not,
Whoa.
yeah. And so from that, that's where like the skills from family constellation comes through. And I don't remember the exact details of how the North Node got unfrozen, but it came alive. And after it came alive, the download came through.
Wow. And now you're like you said, you're playing in the field. It's
Yeah.
like you set the soldier free.
Yeah,
Feels like the soldier is doing some like inner child healing a little
I
bit.
know.
Know?
Yeah,
Like like he had to be so serious and now he gets to play, you know?
yeah.
Oh, so cool. Well, is there anything else that we haven't covered or that you want to mention?
Uh, I don't, I can't think of anything. Yeah, it feels like we've covered a lot. I just
Yeah, for sure.
so love talking to you about it. It feels like there's so much more to be discovered. And I feel like these kind of conversations that we're, you and I are playing in the field right now just by
Yeah.
being curious and,
Yeah.
uh, just being willing to experience astrology in a different way. Um,
Yeah, and it just was so it felt so powerful to me that I just got really excited to share this with you. Like, I'm just so excited to have you on and share that this method exists. And I can't wait for people to find out about it and to start, practicing it and discovering new things. And I can't help but I kept getting this feeling like you're collecting so much data through these sessions and through this whole experience. And it'll be really interesting to see how or if it gets translated because like it's almost like my old paradigm brain wants to be like, yes, collect all the data, put it in a book, give it to people. But the way you're doing things feels so much more like just let it be an individual experience for each person. And I think there is a lot of value in that. There's value in both. But do you feel like you're collecting things? I'm curious.
right now I'm just kind of observing and I'm a little bit resistant to collecting data because I don't want to just recreate the old way it's been done,
Yeah, yeah. That's the feeling I'm getting. It's so funny. Oh, I think that's just my tendency. I would be like, "Oh, wow, look at all these new discoveries. I want to share them all," you know? But yeah, it's definitely more of an individual process. It does feel like. But also just having conversations, about the sessions, I feel like could still light up a lot of sparks for people,
Oh
you know,
yeah,
and
sure.
because we all have things in common too. So
Yeah.
just plant that seed in there somewhere.
Well, and I mean, there's some things that I know are consistent and it's just kind of a situation of I know when I know, like the black holes, like, oh, they're not the portals, we're the portals. Like, okay, that is consistent, that is across the board.
Yeah.
And I don't know why, but it's like, oh, that's something I need to share.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I mean, the planets and the signs, they're just showing up. I mean, not radically different from what we've been taught,
Yeah.
but they have a very distinct flavor,
Mhm.
and it's based on your experience. And I mean, just like my North Node, I mean, probably nobody else's North Node is going to show up as a frozen soldier, but that stuck with me. And so then I can tune into that. Like, okay, is my North Node, is he feeling lively and active now, or is he, rigid and I mean, he was kind of terrified.
Yeah. Yeah. It's interesting because as you speak about that, I even made a connection with something that came through in my second session with you, where we were connecting with my MC in Capricorn, and it's interesting because she came through as a grandmother, and something I'm realizing as we speak is my Sun and Venus are conjunct in Capricorn, so that Venusian energy probably helps that archetype come through more feminine. But what had come through in the session sort of was with Pluto moving through, there was a transformational process from like a patriarchal way of thinking to more of a matriarchal way
Mm,
of thinking. And so that was a really cool discovery for me with the Capricorn and even Saturn archetype, was to think, okay, what if I explored the feminine side of this archetype more than how it's always presented as the masculine? And it was such a softer energy, when we're talking about Saturn, and your grandmother can be stern, but she's gonna make you cookies no matter what, We're usually working for cookies for with Saturn. So it was just a totally different way of seeing it. And that might have been really individual for me to learn from too. Is like, where can I reframe what I'm working for, how I'm working, or, you know, how to use that energy. So it is really, really fascinating. And I hope that this conversation gets people excited about it. And where
Too.
where can people find you?
TammyRoth.com.
Okay.
Everything is on the website. And yeah, I'm on Instagram and Facebook. Um, Tammy Roth Forgotten Coast on Instagram and just Tammy Roth on Facebook.
Okay. Awesome. Well, thank you so much.
Oh, thank you. So much fun talking to you.
Yeah, totally.